La déconstruction, c'est l'impossible.
Construction of group in Heidegger, introduction to future war, destruction. Well, you know, this is practically nothing. This is not important. Important is this construction of the group, construction of the we, construction of institution. What does it mean, institution in Heidegger, etc. Why I read this? Because I wrote the book about institution. Why institution? Because Jacques Derrida was always upset with institution, with institutionalism, counter-institution, etc. I don't like institution generally, and I like counter-institutional, contre-institution, as Jacques Derrida wrote or mentioned many times. Well, and I tried to find, does exist something in Heidegger? And you can see at the beginning, jetzt sei wir Zeit. You have this, you have not. You have, this is motto of this text. On the right side, you have this. And then at the first note, you have explanation. One text, one famous book of Heidegger, read many times, problematic, etc., etc. But in this book, you can find his resistance against liberalism. Why? Liberalism is Ich-Zeit, that means I, time, Ich-Zeit. And this new, we can say, National Socialism protocol will be Wir-Zeit. We time. And this is first, it's not necessary, Masumi, to translate. Cool. This is, you can find first note about this in Heidegger. This is spring semester 34. And this is several paragraphs in Heidegger's book, Heidegger's seminar. You can see at the beginning what he wants to do. He wants to propose some kind of constitution of we, who we are, who are we, etc., etc. This is some kind of theater scene. He is in the class, and he's trying to ask, he's trying, in the first page you have the quote, who are we ourselves, the questioners. You can find this, wir sind, wir selbst, etc. The organization of these four paragraphs of the seminar, Logik als die Frage nach dem Wesen der Sprache, could be read as a possible portrayal of an institutionalizing of a group, in this case made up of a teacher and several students. The same scene as we have today. And his idea is to construct, to define, to explain what does it mean, is it possible we, what we can do with we, if we are group or not, we are we or not, etc. And well, in the second page, maybe this is in your text, second page, but you see that Heidegger repeats in this seminar several times. I am in the middle of the page, quoting Techne and the institution. Means that I don't know how it functions in Japanese, but in Latin, institution, instrument, and instruere are practically in synonymia. And this is, you can find here note 4, Heidegger note 4, you have note 4, die Frage nach der Technik, Institute oder sogar Instrumente. This is synonymous for him. That's why it's important to understand what does it mean technique in Heidegger. And also in the note 4, Institute sind nicht die Wissenschaft, sondern eine zu ihr gehörige Einrichtung. Because in German you have several words for institution, Einrichtung, Stiftung, and Heidegger is using several times in different seminars this word Stiftung. This is very important, famous word in Husserl. You can find Stiftung, Erstiftung, etc., many. I know that in Kyoto you are phenomenologists generally, that you know very well what does it mean Stiftung in Husserl. You see Institut Apparate, also Apparate, Institution as appareil in French, dispositive in Giorgio Agamben, the appareil in Althusser you have appareil. This is important also word. Why dispositive institution, instruments, instruction? Because how to put several elements in one set, how to put people in one class, how to put people together, how to work together, how to do together, how to live together. This is how to establish the word together. Well, that's his idea. Where is the problem here? Because Heidegger is leader, as I am leader, Führer in this class, as Sam and me today. We are trying we are talking. That's the difference, because in talking, listening, you are active because you are focused on the text. That means you are producing also social acts because you are listening. You understand? This is one phenomenology is different. Reinach wrote there exist social acts and negative social acts. For example, listening is negative social act. If you are listening, you have focused, and we are together. If you are listening, and he's provoking this. He's trying to understand what does it mean to be in this class, and is it possible to found we are. And here you have, for example, then on page 3, you have many. Who is he himself, the questioner? Who are we ourselves, the questioners? Many, Heidegger, I hope you read something. He's repeating all the time, and Heidegger uses the first person singular only once, and even that only when he is speaking about the priority of each individual individually of the group, over the group. I count several important moments in this text, and this. Where is the problem? Problem is between wir und ich, we and I. How to understand this jump from first person singular to first person plural. Okay, for example, in his speaking, the leader, this is C. By page 3, you have A, B, C, D. You have several. In C, in his speaking, the leader always adopts the first person plural. thus suspending not only his own potential first-person singular speech, but also the potential appearance of any other singular and singleness. This is quote, Émile Benveniste, one important linguist, very important for Jacques Derrida. He said one sentence that only I can say we, only from first person singular, only first person singular can say first person plural. Only I can say we. Well, this is important. When I'm saying we are, I'm erasing I am. This is trick of leader. This is leader is doing this. Leader transforms his self in we self, for example. I don't know, it's impossible to say, but okay, this is in point C. You have constantly leader, importance of leader, and Heidegger repeats several times his position as a leader who has capability to question, because I can the capability to question who we are, etc., etc. Well, here you have 6, 7, and 8 notes, 3 notes on page 3. Interesting is this 8. I read several seminars because in Heidegger as Derrida at the beginning, I think, because Derrida repeats Heidegger in many things. Yeah, he's trying to be Heidegger, generally form, not in all phases, but in many of them, in several phases during many years. And he had, as Heidegger, 2 kinds of seminars, one for all people and for all students, and the other Ober seminar, just for chosen people. And because in that period Heidegger is on note 6, you can see that he has the other seminar about Staat, Natur and Geschichte. You can see this in the same time when he's, and this seminar now is translated. When I wrote this text, I'm not sure, I had some parts, and but note 8 is important. Heidegger clearly shows the relation of the thematization of the state and we, and you have here your translation, note 8. Wenn wir jetzt nach dem Staat fragen, then fragen wir nach uns. This is, you see this. Staat is the same as practically as us, as we are. In the same time, he's doing 2 things. He has this seminar about logic and this seminar about Staat and Natur, with one jurist plus. This seminar, the other one who is published also, this is the seminar with one Erich Wolf was his name. They are together, they are teaching together this seminar, and this is the first year when Heidegger is rector, first seminar. That's why it's important, maybe. I'd like to know what's happening in Kyoto in that period of time. That will be beautiful. Does exist some students from Japan in this seminar? That will be also beautiful to know, because we don't know. I probably Sam maybe, I don't know. I try to understand. I try to find who that will be beautiful. Who was present there? but we know now that it was present one Jew, one woman Jew. She was aunt of Ernst Tugendhat, and she Helene Weiss, and she had the notes from this seminar. And after her notes, Farias, that Spanish guy, makes the book. And then we have two versions of this seminar logic. One from Farias, that means Helene Weiss, and the other one from two brothers, Martin Heidegger and his brother. This is most important laboratory of fake laboratory in the history of Western philosophy in 20th century, because they are changing. They are making different text than it was. Okay, page 3, page 4. It's a position of teacher, because teacher is really is really questioning his own self or the human as such. You can when he's. I know that I'm doing something that Masumi said that I not to do, but it's easy to you will read this text. It's not necessary to read it now, but just think that I'd like to present what he's doing, and that's it. For example, note 12. You can find we are here, we are ready, let it happen. We are here, we are involved, etc. You can follow, if you follow Heidegger, all of this, you can see that this is soldat, this is military language. This is language of vocative. There are many vocative. I don't know how to say vocative. Does exist vocative in Japan, in Japanese? Does exist vocative? Hey, does exist this? You can see this well. Then, step by step, we arrived on the page 5 and the idea of belonging. Belonging to be. This is most important. What we have now, we have several moments of important to establish one institution. We have leader. We have leader who is pronouncing that we are here, that announcing our presence. Then here we have belongingness. That means to be part of to be part of the group, to be part of the Nazi party, to be part of the class. It's necessary to belong. What does it mean to belong? When we start to belong to somewhere, we are belonging just 3 hours to this event, but you are belonging to this university much more. We are belonging to institutions, different institutions. We are belonging to different group. What does it mean belonging? In this seminar, page 5, you can find this drama between individual and the group and belongingness. For example, here are few questions that interest me. Who is or what is we, or who is the we constitute? What status does it have? Further, is the thematization of the we a condition for any theory of the institution? That means, is the we that without we there is no institution? And finally, does a potential theory of the institution, which I'm trying to formulate, necessarily include the work of Martin Heidegger? Well, I try to in this text I try to give him importance for the constitution of institution as such. Is it Heidegger important for this? In between the 5 and 6 page, I mention something. Maybe you remember this story, Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel. In Tower of Babel, this is first institutional building, we can say, because one group of people, migrants, make something huge. We can say that they are Derridian guys. They are making counter institution, because this institution will be, as you remember, destroyed. Well, here, when we are building the institution is artificial. This is depends not on the God or the nature, but of us, of man. We are making the institution, and in that case, Heidegger makes the class. Heidegger makes the group. Führer makes the state, Nazi state, etc. This is institution. This is our act, our collective set of individual acts or collective work. In note 14, what you have here, I put here several notes. 14, I found one text which is good. I found text Nathalie Deprat, note 17. This is in history of philosophy. You have very, very little or small quantity of the text about we, about constitution of the we, because all philosophers generally wants to, they are talking individually as how to say, this is I person always, and in an analytical philosophy also no thematization of we general. It's very okay, here you have several texts. Here you have Jacques Derrida in 16, page 16. This is the Benveniste. He's using in text. He's using in text. I forget. Résistance de la psychanalyse. He's using the Benveniste. Then. Here, page 7, I mentioned here one man, Franz Rosenzweig, who also wrote about we, an important, and for him, importance of we is an importance of community is also very useful for us in constitution of the group institution of the group or institution of the we are. Here then you have the page 7 idea. I don't know how is translated in Japanese, because I'm trying to differentiate us, our, we. In English, we are, but this is up to us, and we have one of us, one of our. These three moments, I don't know how it functions in Japanese. That will be beautiful if you can explain. Without this is that functions in English or in German. In French is complicated because in French you have nous, we. For example, this is quote de Sartre. Sartre, in Critique of Dialectic Reason, he's talking about two functions of we or nous in French. One is when nous is active. We have here one French woman, and I'm improvising. I'm before her. Nous sommes ici. We are here. Nous, but il nous regarde. He is watching us. This nous is passive here, and nous, we in French can be active and passive in the same time. Not here, because he, us, us is passive. In French, nous can be. This is important for the Constitution. For Sartre, who is also, Sartre is very important for the construction of the we, or construction of the project, construction of the institution also. Page 8 is several problems about the word belonging. I'm belonging to this group. I'm part of this group. I'm not neutral. I'm part of it. Here you have belong. You have part of you being with you, with all of you, or with these others. What does it mean with you? What does it mean part of you? And problem with our and us. Why? Because in this text, there are many texts about this reflexivity, this word selbst. All this problem with this word, I am not, Sam is important here because he knows better than me what does it mean, how functions selbst in German. And without this thematization of selbst, there is no we, there is no wir. And in selbst you have immediately this kind of reflexivity. And then in note 19, I put one Russian guy, because Yevgeny is here, and Semyon Frank, maybe one of the best Russian philosophers, best for me, who wrote first. I think this is first thematization of VR in the history of the philosophy, we can say, because he wrote the book about we. And this book is translated, or he was German, bilingual, German-Russian guy. Book is, he produced two books in German and in Russian. And this book is beautiful because he made one just important sentence you can see in this 19 and I think 21 or 22, no, 23. This is the idea that we is always open. We is never closed. That means when we are saying we are here, it is not that we are one group and we are immediately in conflict and in war with the other group, with the other class. For him, when we are saying we are expecting somebody who is not here. This is great. This is Derrida. Derrida before Derrida. Great guy. Here I have a problem in note 20. Take a look. Note 20. This is selbst. This is quote Heidegger. Wir ist der Mensch. Who is the man? Ein Selbst. What? Ein Selbst. I don't know how. Is it important to say oneself? If we are saying oneself, what? Wir ist ein Selbst. Wir. You see this? This is incredible. Wir sind wir, also wir sind wir die Fragende. This is the end of note 20. That means Selbst is the same as wir. You can see this. This is, I don't know, this part deserves one new text. Incredible. I don't know how to say. Please help me now, Masumi, in Japanese. Myself. Is it possible to say? Yeah, please explain us. Please.
In Japanese, we say, yeah, ourselves. 私たち自身と言います。
And is it possible to say this, that self is we? Is it nonsense? Okay, you see the problem. 20 note. If I, I put this in the note because I didn't know what to do with this. And this is important. It's necessary to write new text about this. Okay, in page 9 you have several phrases. You have several quotes on Heidegger. Of Heidegger in this. I will read one. This is where 22 note. At the end of 21 in text note, you have this. What he said, Heidegger here, he said before this quotation, at the end of this quotation is the note 22. Please, let us see together. I am, before this quote, you have one sentence before, two sentences before. I am myself, or I am we, because as a human being, together with many others, I belong to the collective of human beings that is the group as such. Practically, I am we really before I am I. Okay, this is the question. If all of us, if we are part of this group before we are in this group, or we are here spontaneously, or we are here because you hosts arrange this meeting. Idea is Heidegger. What Heidegger wants to do is to explain who is first, I or we. Sometimes we is first. Sometimes I is first. And I didn't solve this problem. I think that he's hesitating. Who is first? For Nazi party, it will be brilliant if we are first. But on the second level, it's important that each individual decides that he or she is part of the group. Without this, there is not a group. And that's in this text, in Heidegger seminar, you have this, I don't know, all the time. Well, here is the quotation of Heidegger. Nor is this you, in return, the sum total of individual yous. It is not the number of many you that amounts to the you, such as one and the one and one amounts to four. Okay, you see this. You have a set of elements. One. You have 4 pens in one set. You have 25 persons in one room. We are 25. or more than 25. This is in Cantor, Cantor, who was logician. That's why the seminar is logic. Cantor said that there is, if we have 20 elements in one set, it is not that this is 20, because all elements are in relations between them. There are many than 20. You know, Heidegger is not using this idea that when we are more than we are. We are more when we are really we are more than 25. Well, this is the one idea of. He's not using this, but he's using different. He said, rather conversely, the belongingness to the lecture is that which is essential. It is grounded in the listening together, mithören, in the inclusiveness of the individuals in the audience. This you of the listener is divided in the you which as such from such relationship are addressed. Well, then next quote about belongingness. This is after 22 note. You have again this problematic and this difficulty between I and we. And at the end of this quote, you have this is page 9. You have this. I do not. This is the end of this quotation of Heidegger. But the problem with this of thinking, we now recognize in the fact that precisely, if I mean myself, I do not necessarily have to say I, but can and must also say we. I can take myself in an essential belongingness to the others. Well, this is the most important still, again. You know, this, when is philosopher important? When he is crazy a little bit. You know, he's changing some, this is not true, what he said, absolutely. But this is in some kind of invention we have here. He's trying to do something new with the language. Imagine that one analytical philosopher reads this. He will say, this is not correct, this is not. Then after that, after this is 23 note, where I try to add us, you, us, transformation of you into us, to be one of you into being ours, or being one of us, or being an us. This is Heidegger 24, and this is not Heidegger, this is email. Never mind. You see this 23, 24, 25 note idea of transformation of us, we in us, and note 25, note 26. His disciple Karl Löwit, who was in Japan in that period of time. That means during this seminar. Where is the problem? You know, you have Helene Weiss, who was friend of Löwit. She sent Löwit the transcription of the seminar, her notes. That means Löwit knows what is Heidegger what Heidegger is doing in a Freiburg, and we can see this in a letter in the same period of time. This is the letter. He's writing. He's very rough to the Heidegger because he saw that he's in crazy he started to be crazy. Yeah. Well, 26. And then at 7 you can find the page 11. I think this is the after 26 note you have, and start the second interjection. I put here because of Levitt. I used Levitt to connect Heidegger to Jacques Derrida in one way or another, to writing. Because at that period of time I read Maurizio Ferraris. He wrote the book about documentalità, document, and I think this is very good transformation of Jacques Derrida's engagement, and I think that without documents there is no institution, because we need inscription to the class. Masumi and I, Sam and me, we signed many documents here. We tickets, hotels, and tuitions, and to belong to this class, it's necessary to pay something, to make inscription, to sign, to put, to oblige yourself to do something. Well, that means you have document work here, and I finished this text with this problem of width, because in this 26 note you have Levitt and the problematic of writing. Is it important writing or not? And is it important to belongingness of the lecture, or probably exists something before which is written record, some kind of written record. Anyway, the finish, the final, you can find page 13 and note 32. In note 32 you can find Helene Weiss. I mentioned her because mentioned Faria's book, etc. You can see Heidegger last in this text, last quotation about we, Ausruf. Who are we ourselves? At the beginning of this lecture was who are we? Then we have who are we ourselves? And wir sind wir selbst. This selbst, I don't know how it's translated in Japanese again, because this is from this selbst implies echten Gemeinschaft. That means real or genuine here. Real community. Wir sind wir selbst. I don't know how to translate in French. Also, this is that's why. Okay, at the end, 14. In this same quotation, you have this in the middle. There are things that are essential and decisive for a community, and precisely these things do not arise in the community, but in discipline, strength, and solitude of an individual. One believes that the community is responsible for it. One believes that if 10 or 30 unprepared and ignorant people squat together and babble day after day, then a community or genuine relation results. The camp delusion is the counter appearance of any camp. Okay, here is this again, through the whole seminar you have this, he said, decisive, community is community, not because there exists some kind of work before community. That means if the community is important, we can say, is the community is in this seminar. You have many times he was writing about bigness, grosse. He has obsession of the bigness. You know, he's a Rem Koolhaas, if you know this architect who is bigness. Here he said that there is something before, something individual, something private. To build something, he said again, these things do not arise in the community, but in before. Community is community before, exists something before, I don't know, exists something before for him, decision of individual to be part of it. You know, decision of soldier, decision of citizen to be part of the Nazi party. Decision of him to be part of the Nazi party. This is the individual decision. Wow. And that's why it's important. This community, if I'm hesitating, because he was hesitating all the time, and you can find in this period of time there are one text when he's explaining to one old man that he got the invitation to teach in Berlin, and he's hesitating, he's silent, hesitating, and he said no, I will stay in Freiburg. Well, drama about decision. What does it mean? Decision is important to be together, we are. Without decision, it's nothing. Well, I think it's wrong, but well, you will. Okay, at the end, 35, note Kaizo essays. Husserl speaks about primal we. I hope you know that fragment. Husserl several times he has we level, I level, etc. in different period of his life. This is important moment, and well, you have before you anyway. You have before you many possibilities, and my idea was to open this this area, try to open, and well, I don't know. That's it. Thank you very much.
It's extremely, thank you for everyone who has made this event possible. I'm very happy to be here. And I find it extremely interesting that Petar has begun by raising the question of the who and the community, the institution, because the format that you have chosen here in a way is performing that, because we have two speakers coming with much in common, and as you'll see, with quite a bit of overlap, and yet, of course, divergent points of view and perspectives and so on. So we have something like a heterogeneous community, or a heterogeneous we, and so we'll be practically performing some of the questions that have just been raised, and we'll have a chance to discuss. Okay, I'm going to read my text, and I hope that you're following it in Japanese. Will be a little bit like in a film, when you see a film and there are subtitles, and that the subtitles don't act too much as a distraction, but as an interesting interference with what's going on. And because languages obviously are not equal, and my experience has been that what goes on in their interaction is extremely interesting and illuminating. So, and that's something you'll be able to, I hope, judge more than I in this case. So, it is no exaggeration to assert that the writings of Derrida are obsessed with, or perhaps better, possessed by, the uncanny from start to finish. His explicit readings and discussion of the uncanny go back at least to 1969, when he first gave the double séance, the double session, and they continue throughout his subsequent writings. Nevertheless, it is in 2 lecture series that perhaps his most extensive discussions of the uncanny can be found, namely in 1991-92, his seminar entitled Responding to the Secret, Répondre du Secret, just recently published in French, and there's an English translation in preparation. And a few years after, the first year of his lectures on hospitality, dating from 95 to 96. So in what follows, I'll be primarily focusing on these 2 lecture series, since what they contain might be Derrida's most elaborate thinking of the question of the uncanny, or actually his rethinking of it. Because in contrast to his illustrious predecessors Freud and Heidegger, Derrida's approach to the uncanny is rarely unmediated by the work that has preceded him. By contrast, Freud, for instance, rather quickly dismisses or marginalizes his predecessor, a psychologist named Jentsch, only to see the latter's theory of the uncanny as the result of intellectual uncertainty return to haunt him, Freud, in his attempt to come to grips theoretically with the elusive uncanny. In the case of Heidegger, his initial consideration of the uncanny, taking place within the tightly knit framework of being and time, Sein und Zeit, contains no reference at all to previous work on the subject, much less that of Freud, of course. Now, Derrida's approach to the uncanny, on the other hand, is almost always mediated by the work of his 2 precursors. This is all the more striking. It is therefore all the more striking that Derrida never considers Heidegger's extensive discussions of the topic outside of being and time, at least to my knowledge. For instance, in a text that Derrida comments on elsewhere that he knew very well, namely in the 1936 lectures, later published as Introducing into Metaphysics, in German Einführung in die Metaphysik, and even more in Heidegger's 1942 lectures on Hölderlin's hymn, the Ister. In those lectures, Heidegger displayed everything that both anticipated Derrida's approach to the topic, but also that diverged from it. The affinity consisted in affirming a motif that both Freud and Heidegger had already introduced, but that Derrida was to intensify, namely, the affinity between the uncanny and the medium of literature. Freud, for instance, had already argued that, quote, the uncanny that we find in fiction, Dichtung, is much richer than what we know from lived experience, Erlebnis. It embraces the whole of life and something else besides, something that is wanting, is missing in real life, end quote. Now, in his lectures on the Ister, Heidegger, I believe, takes this insight one step further when he proclaims that it is perhaps only in literature, in what in German is called Dichtung, that the uncanny can truly be articulated. In his reading of the second chorus from Sophocles' Antigone, Heidegger declares, quote, that the singular figure of Antigone embodies the essence of the uncanny, which he describes therefore as, quote, the poem of coming to be at home while away from home. That's my translation of heimisch werden im Unheimisch in Unheimischen. This definition, however, does not apply to the uncanny in the strict sense of the word, because Heidegger has, in the meanwhile, shifted the emphasis from the word that originally designates uncanny, namely unheimlich, to the word that sounds almost the same and yet is significantly different, namely unheimisch, which I would translate as unhomey. And he does this in order to suggest the possibility of transcending the violence he has previously attributed to the uncanny qua unheimlich, a violence that reflects the fact that for Heidegger, the unheimlich, uncanny, remains caught in the world of beings, Seienden, without being able to accede to a proper relation to its alternative, Sein, which is usually translated in English as being, but which I prefer to render as the to be. We can have time perhaps to discuss that later on. In short, Heidegger moves from a position acknowledging the uncanny as an untranscendable, conflictual force. This is in the Introduction to Metaphysics, 36. And the possibility of overcoming it in order to develop a position which argues that you can possibly be at home in the unhomely, qua unheimisch. So this distinction, which sounds trivial, is absolutely crucial, I think. What allows Heidegger then to shift his focus from his earlier attempt to read the second chorus of Antigone in the 1936 lectures, published later as Introduction to Metaphysics, where he described the experience of uncanniness as an untranscendable confrontation with overwhelming forces of beings, shifting to a more domesticated version in the later text, 42, stressing the possibility of arriving at a more homely relation to Sein, the to be. All of this is made possible by the emphasis he places in the 1942 lectures on a single quality that he attributes to Antigone, both the figure and the tragedy. This is the quality of what in German he calls Gehören, meaning both belonging and listening. And I find this extraordinary parenthesis that we are both wind up talking so much about belonging, since this is totally, we're coming at this from two quite different aspects. Antigone emerges as the manifestation of this belonging insofar as she does not seek to overcome or deny the ephemerality, the transience of the world of beings, especially living beings, but rather accepts it as an essential attribute of what Heidegger considers to be her belonging to Sein, to the to be. For mortal beings, listening and belonging to the to be, Sein, means, among other things, for Heidegger, accepting death, mortality, which Heidegger states is that singular event to which Antigone already belongs. That's a quote. It says, death is the singular event to which Antigone already belongs, gehört. It is this sense of belonging which, this is also very important for the previous discussion, which in German also can mean to obey. In other words, gehören can mean to belong, and it can mean to obey. It is this sense of belonging that enables Heidegger to conclude his 1942 rereading of the Chorus of Antigone on a much more positive note than in his reading of 1936. I've gone into some detail here in order to be better able to situate what distinguishes Derrida's approach to this question from that of Heidegger. For Derrida's approach to the uncanny, nothing could be further, this is my argument, than the sense of belonging on which Heidegger insists. And this has everything to do with the previous discussion, and we can come back to this. This has to do with the temper of both thinkers, but also perhaps with the concrete historical situation to which each was responding. Heidegger delivered his lectures on the Ister, as I've already mentioned, in the year 1942. That is, a year in which Germany was in the midst of an attempt to subdue all of Europe, and in particular the Soviet Union. The question of being at home while being away from home was thus intimately connected to Germany's historical political situation in 1942. To what extent this situation could have influenced Heidegger's radical shift in his understanding of the uncanny is, of course, impossible, I believe, to ascertain. What is striking, however, is what the same year, 1942, meant for the young Jacques Derrida. And here's a quote from Derrida. This date, 1942, will have been for me the name of a cut or a trauma. Certainly an unconscious sedimentation formed then, but also in a no less unconscious manner, an intellectual determination, even if I did not comprehend much of what was going on in 1942, when the little Jew from Algiers that I was, with the onset of anti-Semitism that was French and not Nazi in Algiers, when I was expelled from school. Even if I didn't understand much, through this wound, a certain perspectival way of looking, in French, une certaine mise en perspective, took hold of me, both consciously and unconsciously, concerning intellectual matters, cultural issues, language problems, etc. Already a configuration that could be called intellectual, even ideological, not conscious, settled in, end quote. The perspective and configuration that Derrida dates as stemming from his expulsion from public school in 1942 consists precisely in what will become a long-standing suspicion of the sense of belonging, Zugehörigkeit, that informs Heidegger's apparent resolution of the problem of the uncanny. This is how Derrida sums up the effects of this early traumatic experience regarding his relation to language. Quote, the French language, for example, is my language. I don't have any other, but at the same time, it is radically foreign to me. I do not own it. This is precisely what allows me to have my idiom. Place, family, language, culture do not belong to me. There are no places of belonging, in French, appartenance. I do not belong any more to such things than they belong to me. My point of departure starts there where this belonging is interrupted, in French, c'est rompu, end quote. Now what Derrida is describing here does not amount to a simple negation or exclusion of the sense of belonging, but more precisely to its interruption. This in turn implies that what existed prior to the interruption involves some sort of continuum. The notion of interruption echoes Hölderlin's theory of tragedy in his remarks on Oedipus as structured by a caesura, in Latin a cut, and it is at work in Heidegger's 1936 lectures, where he concludes his discussion of the uncanniness of human being by describing it as a breach, Breche in German, and as an incident, a Zwischenfall again in German. That is literally falling between the world of beings and that of Sein, of the to be. That's Heidegger's 1936 interpretation of the uncanny. This sense of an interrupted belonging suggests why and how Heidegger's thought could, on the one hand, appeal so strongly to Derrida, and perhaps become what is probably his single most significant intellectual influence, but it also suggests why Derrida felt constantly compelled to distinguish his approach from that of the German thinker. The fracturing ambivalence of belonging informs Derrida's fascination with the uncanny, in both its Freudian and Heideggerian forms. A fascination he sums up in a series of conversations with Italian colleagues published under the title The Taste of the Secret. I quote Derrida, "I have a taste for the secret. It clearly has to do with not belonging. For me, the demand that everything be paraded in the public square and that there be no internal forum is a glaring sign of the totalitarianization of democracy. Belonging, the fact of avowing one's belonging, of putting in common, be it family, nation, tongue, spells the loss of the secret." End quote. Perhaps this sense of not belonging is also why Derrida's fascination with the uncanny rarely takes the form of a coherent, integral essay on the subject, but is always indirect, fragmented, and unfinished. Could this be Derrida's way of keeping its secret, or as Heidegger might put it, of coming to be at home in the unhomely? Second section. So far, I've mainly discussed Derrida's personal history, which of course counts, but cannot provide anything like a genealogy of his interest in the uncanny. Expulsion from grade school in Algiers in 1942, accompanied by the social and political rejection entailed in the then official Vichy policy of anti-Semitism, may have contributed to a sense of not belonging that is perhaps an essential condition of the uncanny, at least so far as deconstruction is concerned. Something must first be perceived to be strange in order for it then to be rediscovered abruptly as being all too familiar. But such personal details cannot suffice to account for the intellectual configuration that was to sustain Derrida's sense of not belonging and make it productive over decades of thinking and writing. It is necessary, therefore, to look elsewhere for the factors determining this genealogy. In doing so, I turn first to Derrida's early deconstruction of Husserl's notion of ideality in La Voix et le Phénomène, Speech and Phenomenon, 1967. This text set a pattern for a procedure that recurs throughout Derrida's writing. The main Husserlian argument with which Derrida takes issue involves the affirmation that thinking is equivalent to a dialogue of the mind with itself, a dialogue that is essentially an internal monologue, and that therefore does not require the externality and differentiality involved in linguistic signification. It doesn't really need language. This dialogue of the mind with itself therefore presupposes the existence of an ideal object held to be independent of the here and now acts and events of the empirical subjectivity that intends it, insofar, namely, as it is assumed, quote, to be repeated infinitely while remaining the same. It is as though, in reproducing what one thinks and tells oneself, no extraneous element need be involved. Hence, this is all Derrida describing Husserl, hence the idea of a self or auto-affection, in German, Selbstaffektion, term that Husserl uses. Against this argument now, Derrida asserts that the very process of repetition required to extract what Husserl considers to be a self-identical ideal object from the variations necessarily imposed by empirical changes, this very process reintroduces alteration and difference. Quote Derrida again. In spite of the diversity of empirical characteristics that may modify it, a signifier must remain the same and be able to be repeated as such, despite and across the deformations which the empirical event necessarily makes it undergo. By reason of the primordial repetitive structure of signs in general, there is every likelihood that real effective language is just as imaginary speech, and that imaginary speech is just as effective or real as real effective speech. From this, Derrida concludes that ideality, which is but another name for the permanence of the same and the possibility of its repetition, that ideality does not exist in the world. It depends entirely on the possibility of acts of repetition. It is constituted by this possibility, end quote. But since such acts of repetition also carry with them inevitably deformation and alteration of what they repeat, such a notion of ideality as self-identity is in principle, for Derrida at least, untenable. This deconstruction of self-identity as repetition lays the groundwork for the concept that Derrida will go on to elaborate some years later in his polemical discussion with John Searle, namely the notion of what he calls iterability. I quote, a rather long quote. This iterability is indispensable to the functioning of all language, and I would add to that of every mark. Iterability supposes a minimal remainder as well as a minimum of idealization, in order that the identity of the self-same be repeatable and identifiable in, through, and even in view of its alteration. For the structure of iteration implies both identity and difference. Iteration in its purest form, and it is always impure, contains in itself the discrepancy of a difference that constitutes it as iteration. The iterability of an element therefore divides its own identity a priori, even without taking into account the fact that this identity can only determine or delimit itself through differential relations to other elements, and that it hence bears the mark of this difference. It is because this iterability, this differential, because it splits each element while constituting it, because it marks it with an articulatory break, that the remainder, although indispensable, is never that of a full or fulfilling presence. It is a differential structure escaping the logic of presence or the opposition of presence and absence, end of long quote. Now, if I've taken the liberty of quoting Derrida at such length here, it is because I believe this passage can make clear how and why iterability can be considered to be the matrix of the deconstructive fascination with the uncanny. We recall that in Freud, the uncanny involves precisely the kind of doubling and splitting that Derrida here associates with the convergence of identity and difference in what he calls the mark. His use of this term mark suggests that the structure of iterability is not limited to language in the conventional sense of discourse, but involves every occurrence where any form of recognition takes place. Recognition, objective as well as subjective, presupposes a previous cognition. But if repetition is therefore constitutive of recognition, then, counter to widespread belief, the re of repetition emerges as the paradoxical condition of cognition itself. In other words, cognition only takes place as a form of recognition, and this applies to all forms of identity. Identification presupposes the recognition of a relationship which in turn entails difference. The result is the convergence of identification with disidentification, of the familiar with the strange. In this view, the stability of meanings is based more on conventional ignoring of differences than on the reproduction of the thing itself. In other words, such repetition does not come full circle. There is always something left over or omitted, to which Derrida early on gives a series of names such as trace, supplement, remainder, pharmacon, and ultimately perhaps différence with an A, meaning deferring and differing. Decisive in this process is Derrida's dual assertion that iterability, as he writes, presupposes a minimal remainder as well as a minimum of idealization, end quote. The fact that the second presupposition, the so-called minimum of idealization, is set in parentheses in his text, almost as an afterthought, only underscores, I believe, its significance. For only when there is or has been the expectation of a minimum of idealization can anything like the uncanny be experienced, insofar as it presupposes an element of surprise that interrupts that minimum. This interruption is experienced as a disruption. It disrupts the expectation of the familiar by revealing it to be strange. The strange is defamiliarized as the familiar. When a strange man suddenly appears in the door of his train compartment, Freud can only perceive the newcomer as strange by having a prior consciousness of what is not familiar. This is an anecdote in Freud's essay on the uncanny. The uncanny shock comes from Freud's realizing that this prior consciousness does not include his own image. What is uncanny is not just that Freud discovers that the apparent stranger is in fact his mirror image, but that this mirror image could have been taken for that of a stranger. The situation is that he's in a compartment in a train, and the door springs open, and he sees this old man, a rather unpleasant old man, about to enter, and he only afterwards realizes it's his own image in the door, the mirror in the door. What is disrupted then in this experience of the uncanny is the sense that we can distinguish what should be most familiar from what is strange. The uncanny consists in the abrupt discovery that the familiar can be strange and the strange can be familiar, and therefore that we cannot reliably distinguish the two. When Derrida insists that a minimum of idealization is required for iterability to operate, this can productively be set in relation to Freud's emphasis that the uncanny, as a form of anxiety, involves first and foremost the ego or the I. The I for Freud is that of function of the I is that of organizing, synthesizing, and assimilating. For Derrida, as for Freud, this effort can never be fully successful. And for both thinkers, it is the process of repetition that is responsible. The double, Freud notes, after Otto Rank, represents the defensive attempt of the first person to protect its integrity by reproducing itself. But this very process of reproduction separates the first person from itself, exposing it and preventing it from ever being fully integrated. The same can be said for Derrida's notion of iterability. In the most literal sense, repetition can be seen to delimit what it repeats. It both sets limits and limits the limits it sets. It literally delimits. Iterability, therefore, can also be seen as both presupposing a sense of belonging, Zugehörigkeit, and at the same time as changing it to mere longing without the prefix be. To long for something in English or someone is not necessarily to belong to them or to it. Indeed, longing presupposes a minimal distance or separation from that which is longed for. But such distance or separation also defines a relationship. Separation, therefore, is not isolation. I have more here, but I think I'm going to stop here. And I think we have enough to discuss already, if that's okay. So I'll stop.
Samuel.